Hello, and welcome again. Welcome again to another live on LinkedIn. Now, I did think, I thought I was going live on YouTube as well, which I now know I'm not. So, today we're going to talk about risk management, compliance only. What do we mean by that? Well, people often look at risk in terms of compliance, as in regulatory compliance, not in terms of the way that it affects the company. Now, we've got another minute before we really schedule to start, so I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to join while we're waiting. ICH Q9, of course, and plenty of other people talking about risk. You've got it in the EMA regulations, you've got it in MHRA, you've got it in all the regulations really, but then that's because they've adopted the ICH guidelines. So hopefully you can all see that we're live now. I don't actually know how to see how many people are actually watching, to be honest, anymore. Oops, just done something wrong. Sorry about that. Right, okay, so it's 5 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock and it's time to go live. So today we're talking about risk management. We're talking about risk management and why it's often looked at in terms of regulatory compliance only, rather than risk to the product and the patient. My name is Paul Palmer. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry now for 40 years. 40 years. I started in microbiology. Then from microbiology, where did I go? To QC, analytical QC. So while I was doing my degree, I was in microbiology. Then I moved on to QC. And in QA, I think I was in QC when I started doing my master's. So I did my degree, I got my degree, I went on to do master's in quality management. Quality management for me was an interesting one because it's something that I could apply. Whereas the human biology, working in a pharmaceutical environment, but in microbiology, I could only really apply a small part of what I was learning. Although, having said that, I did apply some of the other aspects of what I was learning. So the human behavior I found really interesting when working with other teams, as well as body language. Now, as you probably already know, that body language is 70% of the 70% of communication. Well, if it's 70%, well, it's really worth watching when you're in a manufacturing environment when you're not sure what's going on. So after the QC, I was then moved into QA management. That was pharmaceutical only. So the previous one had been a mixture of pharma, medical devices, toiletries, and baby products. In micro, it was a wider scope. It was the whole of the site. QA then moved on to subcontract manufacture. That was an interesting one. It was interesting because of the reason behind moving into contract manufacture, because I was the person that had to put the systems and processes in place for the oversight, because during an FDA inspection, we realized that we didn't have what we needed in place. No specifications agreed, no quality technical agreements. We're in a bit of a gap. Unfortunately, the FDA didn't look at the time. Otherwise, we would have been in trouble. So that was my role. Then I moved on to, I stayed in quality, I think. And while I was in QA, I was spending a lot of time in manufacturing, of course. Business process management. But also, probably an interesting one is the transfer. So we did a site transfer of a product, the whole product and process, which of course you have to look at the risks. It was aseptic manufacture. Aseptic manufacture to a site that hadn't done that type of product before. But we were closing the other site, so there's no choice. That was interesting. I even did a tour for one of my colleagues from France on the new site before it went live in French. Now, it's interesting to take somebody, the senior person from quality from another site around, but doing it in another language was, well, I thought I'd be more challenged than I was. Actually, I did well, I think. He understood what I was saying at least, which is the main thing, I think. So what was next? Quality systems management. Quality systems management is interesting in itself. At the same time, I was training to be a qualified person. I've been a qualified person now since 2004. I've been named on licenses since 2004 and still am named. So how long is that? 21 years? 22 years. 22 years named on various different licenses. Generics UK, Biogen IDEC, and I started my own consultancy in 2011. 2011, I was made redundant for my 5th time, and when I was doing this sort of life coaching, so what to do next, they said, well, why don't you go and do what you wanted to do? Because I'd already said that I'd want to do that. What I wanted to do for ages was start my own business, so I did. I've been doing it ever since, and I absolutely love it. So let's talk about risk management. The reason I hadn't started my own business, because I thought it was a higher risk of losing the position if you were running your own business compared with working for somebody else, and it wasn't. The risk that I associated with not having a permanent role didn't exist. I've actually had more time out of work due to redundancies than I've had out of work while I've been running my own business. So that's the first risk assessment, that actually I didn't do enough due diligence. I didn't check what would happen if I started my own business. I didn't look into it in detail. And that's what you need to do when you're doing actual risk assessments. Now, looking at compliance only is a problem. Are you really looking at risk? Are you managing the auditors? Now, if you want to manage risk, you do have to look in at the details, as I just mentioned. But a lot of the time, people think, well, we need to do a risk assessment, because what if the inspectors come and have a look? Well, that's not the reason to do a risk assessment. The reason to do a risk assessment is to actually manage your product, your process, your systems, and make decisions. Without a decision, there's no point. You might as well not even bother starting. Most organizations think they manage risk. They say they manage risk. They use the paperwork. But really, they just do it for compliance. They just do it because they say that they need to. Somebody's told them they've got to do a risk assessment, so they do a risk assessment. They look at the documentation, they fill in the form, but they don't really understand what they're doing. They don't think about why they're doing it. They just say, oh yeah, we're all right now. So what we're looking at now is to expose the gap between risk documentation for compliance and what really is risk management. So ICH Q9R1, risk-based thinking must be embedded across the product lifecycle. You want to be proactive, embedded into operations, data-driven. Now, that's one thing that I would always say you do want to see when you're doing a risk assessment. Now, what's the basis for the decisions? What's the basis for the assessment? You don't want it just to be, oh, well, so-and-so said that it was a problem, so we decided to do a risk assessment. No. You've got deviations. You've got 17 deviations. You've got 3 complaints. You've got rejects. You've got recalls, whatever it might be. Where's the risk? Is the risk on that specific line that keeps going wrong? Is the risk in goods in, where we're only looking at the certificate of analysis and not actually doing any work ourselves? Or is the risk in the way that we're training people? Have we just given them an SOP to read, but nobody's actually verified that they understood what we were talking about? Imagine that. You go to drive a car and all you've got before you drive the car is a guide how to drive. I'm sure you have instructions. I'm sure you have. I don't know what country you're in, so I can't say what it is in your country. But we have the highway code in the UK. Now, if you read the highway code cover to cover, you know the rules. Well, that's a bit like reading an SOP. But then you go to the machine, you go to drive your car. Which side do you get in? It doesn't tell you that. What position do you sit in? It doesn't tell you that. It tells you need to look in the mirrors. But it doesn't tell you to hold the steering wheel. Oh, no, actually it does. It tells you to hold the steering wheel at 10 to 2. But does it tell you how quickly to press the accelerator? Does it tell you which foot to use to press the accelerator or the brake or the clutch? No, it doesn't. Does it tell you about the biting position for the clutch and the balance you have to get with the accelerator so that you're actually set off? No, it doesn't. Does it tell you what angle you want to be when you're looking in the mirror so that you can actually do get into a parking position? No, it doesn't. So what do you learn from the SOP? We learn the rules. But is that really embedded into daily operations? When you learn to drive, you learn about safety while you're driving. And we want to think about, when we're doing our risk assessment, patient outcomes. But how do you do that? You don't do it from your risk management SOP. You do it from doing risk assessments with people and building competence. So what really has a risk management become in a lot of companies? Well, it's triggered. What do we mean by that? Well, you've got a deviation and you say it's a major deviation. So you've got to do a risk assessment, haven't you? And root cause analysis and a kappa, because it's a major deviation. But is that something major because it's going to impact the patient? Or is it major because there's financial implications? Or have you decided it's major just because it's a specific product that's important to you on the market? You need to have risk management embedded into your systems and processes. You don't want to just do a tick box FMEA. FMEA is not always the right tool to use. The one I like is the post-decision documentation. So you've got your problem, you've got your complaint, and you've already decided what you're going to do about it and what the reason for it was. But you need to write it down, don't you? So you've already decided what the answer is. So you write that down first, and then you just have to fill in the boxes so that you get there. Another one that I see too often when I'm auditing is the risk assessment's been carried out, but there were no actions identified. There was no decisions made. Apart from, oh yeah, it's okay. Everything's okay. It's going to be fine. Yeah, we've got residual risk, but it's going to be all right. We can ship the product. On the basis of what? Often they don't even say that there's no impact to the patient or the product. Often they just say accepted. Well, why? The risk is still there. So how can you sign off your risk assessment? Well, the SOP says we've got to do a risk assessment, so we're doing it and we're signing it off. Not really the best approach. But why does this happen? Root cause, organizational, cultural. Not the people. It's the way they're being shown. Fear drives behavior a lot of the time. Oh, we've found a big problem. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to shut the light. No, you can't do that. Go away. All right, they're probably going to shout at you. But next time you don't tell them. You fill in the paperwork. Weak training. Weak training is often just read the SOP, tick it off, read and understood, fill in the form. Yeah, I understand that SOP because I'm getting chased. I've been told I've got to get it done. I've got 24 SOPs and I've still got to get my work to do. And I've got to do them before the end of the month, and we've got 3 days. But them 7 batches are also due in the last 3 days. What am I going to do first? Well, which one am I going to get shouted at? Not getting the batches out. Which one? What if I just tick off the boxes on that SOP list? No one's going to say anything. So, there's your decision. Time pressure. Just fill in the form. Doesn't do anybody any good. It's just a tick box. But if leadership focus on inspection readiness, not risk maturity, they need to know what's best for the business, what's right for the organization. They need to focus. If we fill in this form, are we going to be ready for the inspection? Well, we'll have the paperwork done, but will the people actually know what they're doing? And if the inspector or the auditor comes to talk to this person, will they actually know what they filled in? Leadership should guide the way for real training. So what's the cost of compliance if you're thinking? Well, you're going to end up, if risk management exists to satisfy the orders instead of the patients, you're going to get risks that are missed because they've just ticked it. You'll get resource that's been put into something that doesn't actually deliver the results. You'll get recurring failures. 17 deviations this month. Oh, look, we've got the same ones next month, 24 of them. And the next month, another 12. And the next month, another 63. But however many it is, if you don't address the problem, if you don't get to the root cause and identify the risks and mitigate, you're never going to get anywhere. But the worst thing is, you're going to put the patient at risk. And the role of the QP, me, I take it as being the patient's representative on site. Now think about it. If I'm the patient's representative on site, would I accept that document that you've just filled in? Would I accept that risk assessment? Would I accept that deviation without a detailed root cause analysis, without impact assessment? I shouldn't really be releasing the product, should I? But if you've covered up the problem, what am I supposed to do? We don't really want the patients to die, do we? So, warning signs. Every assessment looks the same risk scores, the same language, regardless of product, process, or context. I want to tell you an interesting one. So I had a deviation, or should I say I had a series of deviations from a department. It was a sterile manufacturing department. We were filling vials. We had so at the beginning, we were doing the depyrogenation tunnel. They were washed, they were depyrogenated, they were filled under grade A conditions. But we had deviation after deviation after deviation. And what was the deviations? Well, most of the time, it was microbiology in a sterile manufacturing suite. Oh, but it's all right. We cleaned it after we got this count, so we're okay. Before we did the manufacture. Now, we got to the point where we had we had mold in grade A. Well, of course, you're not going to release mold in grade A, are you? And so, no, you can't go and have a look. Just because you're the QP that's taking responsibility, that doesn't mean you're allowed to go into my department. I said, well, in that case, I won't be releasing your product. So I went in and I had a look. And I still stood on the threshold between A and B. Door open, going through. Of course, I wasn't fully trained. I was being supervised. And it was going to be full clean down afterwards, back into production. They wanted to wait until the next shutdown, but I said, well, you can wait, but I'm not going to release anything, so what's the point? Now, I walked across the threshold, and you know this vinyl that you've got on the floor that's sealed, that's welded together? Well, when I stood on it, it moved, and the bubbles came up through the gap. That was the first problem. So I looked into the edge of the... the door was open. I looked to the sides, and I saw something that looked strange, and I did sort of recognize what it could be, because it was something that I would do at home. You know, when the when the angle of the door hinge isn't quite right, and you need to put something in between the hinge and the door frame. You put a piece of cardboard in there just to do that little tiny adjustment so that you don't have to take it all off, shave off the bottom of the door, put it all, hang it all back up. Well, I saw this telltale line. So I asked them to take it down, take it off. And what did we find? We found something black. It was cardboard covered in mold. So every time it was opened, the spores were getting released. So we had the water on the floor, which had not been spotted in harmony checks by the team, by the cleaners, by the head of production. And then I thought, well, if I missed those two things, those two quite, I don't know if you'd say they're obvious. If you weren't a microbiologist, maybe you would. Let me know what you think. Would you see them as obvious? Would you look for the mold? Would you look for the cardboard in the hinge? Would you check the threshold where there was a gap in the actual seal? Would you stand in the right place? But then I looked further around and there was a couple of windows in the grade B so that you could see in what was happening. And along the bottom of the window, you can see where they cleaned it. The seal had come away. And I looked a bit more and there was another one. I said, I need you to check that for the whole facility, please. And I needed them to check for seals in the floor for the whole facility, all grades. And I needed them to check the doors to make sure that they didn't done it somewhere else as well. Because they weren't just getting mold in grade A, they were getting it throughout the facility, this unit. Nobody done a risk assessment. But I wasn't willing to take the risk. For me, it was a critical failure to have mold in grade A. Back to the warning signs. Scores are manipulated. Risks are adjusted to justify a decision already made. That's what they were doing. They were copying and pasting the same information into the deviations. There was no risk assessment that linked to the outcomes. The risk assessment was on its own, standalone, a separate document to the deviation, separate to the customer complaints, separate to the recalls. But then when I asked the production manager who was bringing me the assessment, he couldn't explain why he was giving me the scores he was. Do you know what he said? Oh, well, I got used to it, and this is the way that the previous QP used to accept it when I wrote it like this. I thought, what? So he was writing a document to get it approved. He wasn't doing root cause analysis, risk assessment, and completing the deviation with the facts. No wonder I found a problem, eh? Misuse of risk tools. Well, who's been trained in the selection of the correct tool for the risk assessment? Or do you just follow your SOP? So failure mode and effect analysis, complex multi-factor process analysis. You look at all the different potential sources. Ishikawa diagram or fishbone is another name. Arbitrary scoring. Oh yeah, we'll do 1 to 25. Well, what's the basis of number 7? I don't know. Well, what you should do is have reasons behind your scoring. Have some description so that it makes sense. And differentiation of known risks and unknown risks. If you treat them the same, you're not going to be thinking about it correctly. So, as you can see in the diagram, the FMEA multifactorial, but not to every situation. A lot of companies say just do an FMEA. They used to do. I'm not so sure they do so much now. Hopefully you don't use it for everything. A risk matrix. Do make sure that your risks are, that your numbers associate with something. Known versus unknown. Differentiate. Don't just treat both sides the same. So what does good look like? Well, decisions are made. And this is probably the biggest thing that I want you to remember from this. If you do a risk assessment and you come up with a root cause and you come up with potential approaches to mitigate, do them. Make the decision. Get the money if it's needed. Spend the time. Actually make the decision to eliminate that risk. But when you do eliminate that risk, what are you going to do? You go back around the loop and make sure it worked. Make sure the tools they use for the assessment are appropriate. Do use a tool that's relevant. And do go back to ICH, because they've got some new ones up there. And they've got good training on there that explains which one to use when. Although I'll be doing some as well. Risk to root cause to kappa. So you identify the risk. Why did that happen? What are we going to do about it? Fix it. Like I said already once, take the action. Don't just leave it. Cross-functional ownership. Risk assessment's not just QA, but not the only ones that can actually have an impact. A lot of the time, you'll find that the operational people are the ones that can fix the problem, that can take the action. And you just support them in documenting it. But make sure you work with them to understand what they're doing and why, and the impact on the patient. You need to make sure you move beyond compliance, shift the mindset, build the capability by working with your team, and embed it in the process. Think competence rather than procedural training. So what's the real question? Would your risk management stand up without the document? Ultimately, you can pass an inspection and still fail the patient. True risk management is strategic, protective, built on science, utilizes the data you've got available, which you are collecting, I hope, and test whether it actually makes a difference. Because if it doesn't, why bother? You don't want risk management that's fragile, reactive, insufficient, that doesn't protect the product and the patient. Ultimately, though, who's it protecting? If you protect the patient and you don't get any adverse events, like how many was it? The children, 84, that died from taking the cough medicine recently, it was last year in Africa. Why? Well, somebody done a risk assessment. Do you know? They've done a risk assessment. And what did the risk assessment say? Oh, well, we've been working with the supplier now for 5 years, and we've never had a problem in 5 years. So we're going to move this supplier from test on receipt to CFA only. But what didn't they take into account was the patient. They only took into account their experience with that particular supplier. So they went from doing full spec testing to CFA only. Now, that particular raw material, the manufacturer made a similar product, a similar raw material, antifreeze versus glycerin. So the antifreeze tastes the same as the glycerin. Only if you do a proper identity check will you see the difference. So it goes into the medicine and it tastes nice. It's quite sweet, actually. So I'm told. I've never drank it, and nor will I. And the kids died, but they didn't know why. 84 kids. What's worse is it happened again. Can you believe it? Not just once, twice. Where was the corrective action? Where was the risk analysis? Well, that's the end of today's session. If you want the white paper, please do go ahead and connect with me on LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn now, so maybe you've got the LinkedIn link already, because I've just realized I didn't actually put it on the screen, which would have been useful, wouldn't it? I don't think. No, I can't share onto the screen while I'm live. No, I can't see a way of doing it. Oh, there's a little thing there. No, that's not going to do anything. I don't know what I did now. Cancel that. Okay, so if you want to find me on LinkedIn, all you need to do is search for my name, Paul R. Palmer. Make sure you put the R in the middle, and then you'll find me easily. You can visit us at the Academy Pharmaceuticalexcellence.com or email info@academypharmaceuticalexcellence.com. Now, it was originally going to be Academy of Pharmaceutical Excellence, which is what the name is on the website, you'll see. So you can do it either way. You won't find Academy Pharmaceutical Excellence on LinkedIn. Maybe you will, but it's not easy. It's much easier to find me, Paul R. Palmer, and then you can just send me a message. But you'll need to connect with me first. I think they get blocked or they go into some different inbox if you're not connected. So find me on LinkedIn, Paul R. Palmer. If you put pharmaceutical consultant, it'll come up straight away. You're welcome, Jim. Glad you enjoyed it. I will be doing more. I'm working on a new training platform, and well, two different ones at the moment. We've got Academy Pharmaceutical Excellence, which has got smaller courses, and I'm working on a longer one, which is more of a build the baseline up, which I'll be announcing soon. But anyway, if you want the white paper, do connect with me. Send me a message. Just say, can you send me the risk management compliance only white paper, and I'll send you a copy. If you want it on email, of course, you'll have to give me your email address. If you want it just on the on LinkedIn, then I'll share your link with you. Okay. I hope you all found that useful. Thanks for the feedback, Jim. I'm glad you liked it. And I'll see you all again soon. So that's me, Paul Palmer, pharmaceutical consultant, qualified person. Do you know what? I should have put auditor on there as well, shouldn't I? But I didn't. I've been auditing now. Did I tell you at the beginning? I can't remember now. I've been auditing suppliers since 1998. 97, 98. I think I passed my lead auditor assessment in 98. But before that, I was doing internal audits, of course, because you don't need well, certainly not back then. You didn't need the internal auditors course at that stage. But even when I was in microbiology in the 80s, when I think about it, I used to audit the departments to see what the source of the contamination was. So maybe I've been doing it. What would that make it then? That make it 50 years, 40 years? A long time. Stephen, nice to see you here. I'm glad you found it useful. I hope to hear from you soon. Okay. I didn't really write myself an ending script for this. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for joining. Nice to see you here, and I hope to see you all again soon.